morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the September edition of Health Bytes with Region 3. We are so pleased to welcome this month's speaker, Sarah DeBacher. Sarah DeBacher is Director of Curriculum Development and National Partners at the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities, where she develops book series and engaging discussion guides focused on the big ideas found in children's literature and supports program partners implementing primetime family reading programs across the U.S. Since joining the LEH staff in 2017, Sarah has trained hundreds of librarians, teachers, early childhood educators, and community partners to facilitate open-ended discussions among intergenerational audiences, and has executive produced and co-hosted the podcast, Little Voices, Big Ideas. She lives in New Orleans with her 2 sons, 3 chickens, and a dog. In today's Health Bites, our speaker will give a presentation on Time Nourish, discussing food and the human experience through the lens of children's books. Thank you so much for being our guest speaker this morning, Sarah, and I will turn everything over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bailey, for that introduction and for mentioning my chickens and my dog and my kids. I want to thank the folks at Region 3 of the network of the National Library of Medicine. It's clear from the support that they've provided me in preparing for today that they care deeply about the ongoing support and education of the network's members. And I believe we should care deeply about that. I'm also, of course, grateful to all of you who are here because of your interest in this topic. I am super excited to share a humanities-based approach to supporting families in making thoughtful and informed decisions, not just about the foods that they eat, but the role that food plays in their lives and indeed in the human experience of all of us. Thank you again to Bailey for the introduction. I'm here because my role involves curriculum and program development for Primetime Family Reading, which is a project of the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities, which is a state council of the National Endowment for the Humanities. But I want to emphasize that the work that I do involves engagement with others. I engage with humanities scholars, librarians, and also with participating families to build and pilot the book series and discussion guides that are at the heart of primetime programs. As Bailey mentioned, I also train program partners to implement the programs through the use of the Socratic method and other participant-centered approaches to learning. And I support the national network of partners who implement our programs at libraries and through humanities councils nationwide. I am also a past participant and team member. I trained to be a facilitator for this program back in 2007, and I have been a participant of the program with my kids. I am part of what we call the Primetime Family, which is a nationwide network of people who believe in primetime and its goals. So thank you so much for being here. This is what we're going to get into today. I'm going to provide an overview of primetime. I will describe the ways that we here at Primetime have approached food and nutrition historically. I'm going to share our current approach to supporting food and health literacy through a humanities-based program, Primetime Nourish. And of course, I'm going to offer you all the opportunity to ask questions because I want to learn from you about how you can bring Primetime Nourish to your communities. And I do promise to try to get out of the way quickly so we can get to the goodies of Q&A. I really could spend the entirety of our time together providing a nitty-gritty overview of primetime, but in a nutshell, primetime is a suite of intergenerational reading and discussion programs that was developed in 1991 by the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities in partnership with the American Library Association and with funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Essentially, one night a week for 6 weeks, families gather for 90 minutes in libraries, schools, early childhood centers, community centers nationwide to read and discuss carefully curated picture books. And what they're discussing are the big ideas associated with the humanities and humanities themes that are embedded in those books. As I mentioned, Primetime Family Reading was first developed in 1991. Our objective then and now remains to be to disrupt cycles of intergenerational illiteracy. I also want to mention that we recognize the multiple literacies that our families bring to our program, and also that our approach to literacy development is embedded in humanities approaches to learning. At Primetime Programs, we dig into the rich and rewarding ideas that emerge from thoughtful and joyful engagement with children's picture books. I hope you can see the joy that is occurring in these programs. These are some pictures from the program's history. And we really do try to approach literacy development in ways that go beyond rote considerations of who or what, and to help families together with us think critically about the how and the why. Programs are participant-centered. They are intergenerational, with children and grown-ups alike reading and learning together on a truly level playing field. While the program was created in Louisiana, Primetime programs have been offered in more than 40 states through our national affiliate partner network, which dates back to 1998. Through this network, Primetime Family Reading has reached more than 70,000 families. And since I am in the company of librarians, I thought I'd take a brief moment to shine a light on an honor that we are particularly proud of, the Library of Congress's recognition of our commitment to best practices in literacy development. So not only are we experienced and wise, but we have the shiny accolades to prove it. The accolades, of course, are not how we measure our success. The way that we measure our success is by the extent to which we have achieved our goals, which are to deliver quality humanities education experiences to underserved families, to increase public library use, to positively affect attitudes of underserved families about reading, to bond families and around reading to create the precondition for future learning, and to improve student academic achievement. You will note that we do not currently include health outcomes in our programmatic goals, but as I'll share momentarily, we have historically and are continuing to explore ways that our turnkey program model can impact not just literacy outcomes, but health and nutrition ones as well. So our thinking about food and health and nutrition outcomes has evolved alongside our program's longevity. Initially, we conceived of the meal portion of the program, which occurs at the very beginning of each of those sessions, as a way to remove an attendance barrier. Also as a way to incentivize attendance, to build community among participants, and to serve as an informal pre-reading opportunity before the featured book or books of that session. But as our program partners began to ask questions about how to use their program's budget to source more nutritional meals, and of course, with the added incentive of funder interest, we, back in 2015, developed a version of our program called Primetime Plus. Through Primetime Plus and the pilot, which occurred 2015 through 2017, the goal was that families attending the program would be able to provide a natural environment in which children are encouraged to, quote, this was in our support materials, practice new skills and become fluent readers through repeated reading discussions, especially at the dinner table. Primetime Plus, as it was conceived, exposed families to discussions of books and nutritional practices through open-ended questions, again, the use of the Socratic model and dialogic reading, and nutritional demonstrations. The goals of Primetime Plus as a pilot program were to increase school readiness of preschoolers. The program was initially developed for preschoolers and their parents. Enhance parent caretaker skills for facilitating school readiness and healthy eating, and increase positive attitudes about reading with adult participants. Finally, and here's the health and nutrition focus, the goal of Primetime Plus in its pilot stage was to increase positive attitudes about healthy diet with adult participants. And here you can see some images from the program as it was first piloted. You're seeing kids engage with the power bowls, which essentially allowed them to play with their food. The program also featured a nightly highlighted ingredient, such as sweet potato or kale. And the objective really was to integrate play with food in the same way that families and their children were also playing with reading and playing through center-based through centers that were aligned with that session's books. The program was Primetime Plus. That program was generally speaking positively received. But as field testing continued, we began to see that some of our program's components missed the mark. Here you can see one source of pilot learning, an excerpt from a participant survey that was used during the program pilot. Since the use of this particular tool, our participant surveys themselves have dramatically evolved, in part because one of the learnings from the pilot was that some of the questions that we asked families left them feeling judged, as though things that were deficits about their experiences were being emphasized. And that is, of course, not at all what we want. In addition to examining feedback from participant surveys and modifying our approach to how we surveyed families themselves, we also culled pilot learnings from focus groups with implementing partners, from training feedback surveys, and from site visits during the pilot's implementation. And here are some of our broad key takeaways. One thing that we heard was that, particularly in rural communities, the program's featured food items were often difficult for site teams to source. One of our site team members jokingly referred to the program as that we were quinoa pushers. And she said, I don't know where to get quinoa here in rural Louisiana. So obviously, if the menu items themselves were difficult to source, that was something we needed to pay attention to. We also learned that the meal logistics distracted from core program components. You know, when you're focused on power bowls and making sure that those things are coming off without a hitch, it's really fun to see families and kids play with their food. But the books, which were also focused on food, those are really, at primetime programs, the core of the program. The meal logistics were distracting from that. We also learned, as I mentioned before, that program surveys were negatively impacting some respondents' sense of self-confidence. And we heard from us implementing site team members and family members that some of those menu items, i.e. Quinoa pushing, lacked cultural sensitivity. And so through these learnings, we went back to the so-called drawing board and modified our approach in several ways. The first was to revisit the program's books. And that meant then developing two series. The initial program pilot was for preschool children and their families, but we developed a series for our core or sort of original program, Primetime Family Reading, which is for families with 6 to 10-year-old children. So we developed two book series focused on engaging discussions about food and the human experience. We also looked at how it was that we could make a program that was focused on, food and nutrition and health outcomes, truly humanities focused. We looked at food focused scholarship and humanities syllabi to begin to understand how we could apply that lens to our work. And then, of course, the book series that was pulled together reviewed and rated books, ranking them according to the quality of the illustrations, the strength of the humanities content. And what I mean by that is we're really looking for books that open themselves up to the possibility of rich and divergent discussions in which there's no right or wrong answer. Books that allow diverse perspectives and cultures to connect to the content received the highest scores, not just from the scholars, practitioners, and staff, and of course the nutritionists who participated, but from families themselves. Here you can see the full series. On the right, in the column on the right, on the first session, because families and practitioners are focused on, or practitioners and families together are focused on building community and establishing the purpose of the program, there's just one feature book. On the second through sixth night, you'll see that there are two featured books for families with 6 to 10-year-old children who can sit through a more lengthy discussion, and one featured book for families with preschool audiences. There, of course, would also be center-based play after the discussion to engage those families. But I really want to draw your attention to the left side of the table, because this is what I think distinguishes this program from, particularly from other literacy development programs. We're really focused on big ideas. And so on the left, you can see that each of the sessions focused on a big idea as it relates to food and the human experience. And we often think about each session engaging families in one big question. For instance, how does food serve our social connections? Or on the sixth night, how do our foodways connect us? And how do they make us different? I want to highlight a few of these titles because I don't want to say in love with them, but I think they're great books. And of course, I know that I am in the company of librarians. And so let's talk about children's books. This is I Will Never Not Ever Eat a Tomato, written and illustrated by Lauren Child. You can see here the questions that we include as sample discussion questions for the facilitating team. When we train the facilitating team, we always train them to launch a discussion, not to lead a discussion, but then to follow families where the discussion goes. Launching that discussion means beginning with an open-ended question with no right or wrong answer. And you can see here that the objective for this particular book is really to engage in questions about, how is it that we develop particular food preferences? It's a really interesting book, though, because Charlie, the brother, is tricking his sister by renaming foods into eating healthy foods. And so there's also some interesting discussions of morality that can come up in this session out in the field. This is a beautiful book and one that we've received really strong positive feedback about. Fry Bread, a Native American family story, written by Kevin Noble Maillard and illustrated by Juana Martinez Neal. You can see here in the first prompt, this is pulled from a Primetime Preschool Nourish discussion guide, where 3 to 5-year-olds are much more focused on food sounds and tastes and colors and flavors. And so that's a question from that particular audience group and the discussion guide supporting them. But that book is also a featured book for the 6 to 10-year-old kids and their families, where they're asked to think about their own nationality or cultural group and how food plays a similar role, or perhaps different role, of uniting members in their group. This book will punch you in the emotional gut. But I cannot recommend it enough. It's Watercress, written by Andrea Wang and illustrated by Jason Chin. The characters, the family in the book stops to harvest watercress in a ditch on the side of the road. And they are in America at this point. And the narrator's family experiences a longing for China, their country of origin. And here we are asking families to think about the ways in which food raises memories and how food may have a special ability to evoke memories. Finally, at the end of all primetime programs, including Primetime Nourish, we really want the sixth night to focus on celebration, both of the literacy development or the literacy growth that has occurred over the course of the program, but also of the togetherness and just a celebration of what it means to be human, both as a self and in family and in community. This is one of the books from the Primetime Family Reading series for families with 6 to 10-year-old children for the 6th night. It's called Freedom Soup. And you can see that last question, or the question at the end of the first prompt, do you have a favorite dish that you associate with your home's celebration of freedom? On the 6th night, as we've learned from the program being piloted out in the field, families refused to just have the Primetime site team feed them. And there were lots of potlucks and people bringing favorite dishes from their own countries of origin and really celebrating together the freedom that food, when we have access to it, can afford us. In addition to developing new book series and piloting those out in the field, we also piloted table talk prompts. These are open-ended questions that were shared at the Primetime meal. We'd print them out and sort of stick them in one of those, 8.5 by 11 display technical term. And those questions were designed to launch conversations around the meal and also to prepare families for the main course. I knew I was going to descend into a bunch of food metaphors, and here's one of them, which is the story sharing and discussion portion of the program. We also focused our improvements and based on the pilot learnings on improvements to our training and support materials, working with a nutritionist to add sample menus that were sensitive to the diverse audiences who attend Primetime programs and featured ingredients that could be sourced in urban or rural areas alike, even those whose sole grocery store might be a Dollar General. So all of these ingredients can be sourced from a local Dollar General. The 2-year 2019, yes, and continued into 2020. That pilot has landed, and we're now incorporating the learnings from the pilot initially in Louisiana. Now this is a series and program that is available nationwide. We're incorporating our learnings across all of our series themes, emphasizing that the meal portion of the program is more than simply a way to remove a barrier to programmatic attendance, but that it's really a way to truly nourish and be nourished by the food that is served and the conversations that we have with one another at the family table and at the Primetime meal. Here's some feedback from the field, which has been resoundingly positive. One, you can see this Primetime parent from a program here in New Orleans mentioned the book Fry Bread because of its bringing up different cultures and traditions that they held dear. We had a Primetime team member from St. Charles Parish Library in Louisiana tell us that the conversations that were generated helped challenge families to discuss their food habits together in a productive environment. And finally, there is a quote here from Evan Bush, who is a Primetime project director in Georgia and the director of youth services for Georgia Public Library Service. He said, the Nourish series has quickly become a favorite amongst our library programs in Georgia. Food, cooking, and eating are natural topics woven into the fabric of our daily story, connecting families, friends, generations, and community. And I mean, I think to sort of pull away from these quotes culled from surveys and focus groups and, all that pilot stuff from the field, I just want to share that I consistently hear about this particular series, partly because I think I'm in Louisiana and there is no topic more important and significant to Louisianans, it seems, than talking about what it was that you just ate and what it is that you're going to eat later. But I think that it really, food as a topic of conversation through the lens of the humanities and through sort of the safe and accessible platform that is children's books has so much potential to have participants really explore, think, and connect deeply to themselves and to others. I'm already on my way to Q&A. So if you have your cues and your cues ready, go ahead and get ready. I do want to share with you that there are partnership opportunities. So if you've been listening and you're like, how the heck do we get our hands on this for implementation, our community Endowment for the Humanities, we fund programs in across our state, and applications for spring 2024 programs will open on September 15th. The affiliate network currently includes 9 other partner states outside of Louisiana. And if you are in one of those partner states, I'm happy to connect you with the project director in those states so that you can find out about the grant opportunities that are there. And this turnkey model is available for implementation through self-funding wherever there is interest and financial support. As I think program implementers and library folks, you are probably very interested in talking about budgets. Happy to talk about that too. But I did want to share with you these partnership opportunities and my sincere hope that if this interests you, either Time Nourish and these sort of food-focused themes, or the idea of the program as an intergenerational humanities-focused reading and discussion program, that you please reach out to me. My email is here at the bottom of this slide. And you can also learn more about the programs and opportunities by visiting our website at primetimefamily.org. We're not real big on the socials, okay? It's just not our style yet. But we are on Facebook at Primetime Read. I'm eager to hear from you, and I am going to pass the baton back to the good folks at Region 3 of NNLM and wait for instructions about how we're going to handle the Q and the A. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. There's so much great information here. There's a question already in the chat, so I think Brandon will share our question slide. There's a question in the chat, and then we have a couple more. So folks, feel free to type your questions into the chat. We will ask them of Sarah. So the first question is, who are the 9 partner states?
Oh, I knew that was going to come up, and okay, let me see if I can rattle them off. I'm just gonna I'm putting a map in my mind. I mentioned Georgia, so that's one of them, and that our partner there is the library system. Florida, we have programs in Florida. We have programming in Kentucky, Michigan, Nebraska, Washington, Iowa. Who am I forgetting? You're not going to know. Why am I asking this question out loud? Doesn't really matter. Mississippi. That's 8. And Delaware. There we go. 9. Woohoo!
Well, I have a question for you. I'm wondering, I know that like different kinds of sites can host these events, but in your experience, like what are the qualities of really effective host sites for this programming?
Well, I will be frank that no, let me put it this way. I was about to just like shine on librarians and libraries again. And I'll go ahead and do that. When this program was initially developed, it was developed in partnership with the American Library Association, who's been a partner with Primetime since its inception. So libraries are natural partners for the program. One of the things that we train librarians to do is to recruit non-library users. And I don't know a single librarian out there who isn't excited to bring new non-library users into a library and to sort of ignite that excitement and that enthusiasm for the public library as a significant space that should be accessible to us all, right? But we also, anyone really, our strongest partners historically have been librarians and libraries because that's where we've worked. But we recently have been partnering with, in Louisiana, the State Department of Education, which has funded programs that occur in elementary schools. And those are really strong partners as well. I think when we're training and partnering with elementary schools or with educators who are working in a formal setting, we really emphasize the program as a kind of third space, a space outside of places that can be, quite frankly, stressful in those partner types, right? Like the classroom is fraught. Educators are expected to get their students to achieve certain scores. Parents may not feel super comfortable, in the school setting. Similarly, the home environment can be fraught. It can be one when we're reaching our target audiences where there is a lot of stress and perhaps less flexibility and ability to sort of focus on, I don't want to say like sitting around and reading with your kids, but let's face it, like it's difficult to be a parent and to be a family, and it's not easy to make time for that practice. And so in the hands of a school or an early childhood center, we really emphasize how that after school time can be a place, where the standards and the expectations for, getting students to a certain academic score or standardized test score, where those things can fall away, and the focus can really be on what can happen when we just sit together and talk and play about big ideas that are in books that can be found at public libraries. I hope that answered your question.
It does, and I think that's a really great point about removing yourself from kind of what can feel like the drudgery of being in a family and being in our standard sometimes stressful situations. So thank you for that. There's a question in the chat that says, can you share how you have or might collaborate with non-library folks? For example, artists, storytellers, grocery stores, cooperative extension, who also has nutritional programs.
Yes. One of the key features of the program, in fact, one of the components of our training is to focus on how this can be an opportunity to build partnerships within the community with, for instance, local grocery stores, or, when we first developed Primetime Plus, we reached out to local farmers markets. I now can't remember the name of the farmers market collective that we worked with, but we offer them the opportunity to shine a light on their programming at a portion of the 90-minute session that's called, we just call it a library commercial, but really it's a resource, I guess, commercial. The commercial part being related to the name of the program, Prime Time, which of course was a reference to primetime television and getting folks away from television and toward reading back in 1991 when the program was first conceived. But there is that portion of the program where we train our implementing site team to reach out to partner organizations who are serving similar populations to shine a light on what it is that they're offering. We also, I want to say here that there was a mention in the chat of a particular type of partner, artists, storytellers. The folks who are implementing primetime family reading discussions we call them the scholar and storyteller team. The scholar is typically recruited from a local college or community college, partly because this is a program that was initially developed, we are a humanities council, but also because we really want to build partnerships with the scholarly community. But we also have come to really believe that scholarship is something that we do. So we focus more on training that team, not to think of themselves as the scholar behind a lectern or a professional storyteller who might bring props, because professional storytellers love them, but the kind of training that they might have where they're using, props, maybe even costumes and elaborate voices. We really train the implementing partners, the scholar and the storyteller, to simply model approachable and replicable strategies to reading and talking about books together. We want the families who attend the program to feel like this is something I can do. And so I just wanted to shine a light on that because those particular partners, non-library folks, were mentioned.
Thank you so
yeah.
much. Have you considered advertising this program to at-risk communities and foster families where there might be a higher rate of children who have experienced food insecurity? I think this would be great to help children move out of that food as survival mentality.
Yes. I know I've mentioned the sort of turnkeyness of the program, but certainly when we are training site teams, we're very much focused on honoring the expertise that they have about the needs of their respective communities, knowing, of course, that, whether you're in Iowa, for instance, or in Florida, your communities are going to both be similar in some significant ways and also very different. But the primary focus there is is on recruiting families who might not ordinarily have access to the kinds of resources that are available in these educational experiences at a primetime program. These families, their children, I'm hesitating here because I really don't like it when I fall into these families. You can hear there that there's like some distancing language. And in fact, that's really what we're trying to get away from. We really want to think about where is the need, but also what can we learn from families who need access to resources. How can we bring them into community with us and really build a community where everyone feels like they're on a level playing field, as opposed to feeling like they're attending something where they're receiving charity, which can sometimes evoke feelings of deficit awareness or a lack or an otherness. So I feel like I may have gone into a different subject there, but advertising the program to at-risk communities and foster families is a key component of our training of site teams who are recruiting and registering families. And thank you, Tara, for that question.
Have you worked with food banks? You mentioned farmers markets. How about food banks?
Absolutely. One of the iterations of Primetime Plus actually involved working with food banks, specifically to provide groceries and to site team members that were attending. I'm going to go ahead and be frank about the fact that particular program component, like putting together the featured menu item and having a grocery bag and making sure that there were enough of them for all of the programs, in addition to using the program's budget stipend to source and serve a family meal, to source and distribute books, and to do all of the other stuff that's associated with the program. That particular part of the program became a little bit cumbersome. But earlier, Bailey, you asked about who are the right partners. Some of the programs that have taken this turnkey model and really soared with it are those who they just have boundless energy and they're like, I'm going to work with the food bank to get more food resources here. to the program for my families. The sky's kind of the limit in terms of those partnership opportunities and bringing the resources directly to the primetime program. And it's why we really, when we're training site team members, we engage them in talking about what ideas do you have? Who are the folks who have programs in peer alike? Who are the peer alike organizations in your community? And we allow the site team members to really sort of plan together and bounce off one another in terms of generating ideas about where those resources can be found and how they can be brought to bear in the program.
Thank you. We have a bit more of a specific question. I'm looking at Michigan Humanities Program Primetime Budget info, stating they will fund libraries and fund the books. Can non-library entities receive funding in your state?
So in Michigan, I think this is probably, Steve, Anna, you're asking a question about whether that's possible in Michigan. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that the project director, James Nelson, has been working with Primetime for a very long time, and he's incredibly enthusiastic about the program, and they've been a consistent partner. I do think that they have typically partnered with libraries. Libraries and humanities councils are sort of natural partners, but I'd be happy to put you in touch with James to find out about whether there is funding for programming for non-library entities. Here in Louisiana, there is. But that's because we have a different programming model in Georgia and funding model. I'm sorry. In Georgia, they do not. So sometimes Evan Bush, who is the director in Georgia, will reach out to me and say, I've heard from a couple of school-based potential partners, and we don't have the funding type. We don't have the funding to fund primetime at that particular site type. What I do, part of my work here at the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities, is to find funding for national programming. And I can tell you that we are always actively seeking funding for national programming so that we can extend the reach of the program. We will be looking we are going to be reapplying for an expansion grant to the National Endowment for the Humanities that we hope to hear about in 2024. When we get expansion grants, we typically put out an RFP, and we are not stingy about the partner type. Again, librarians and libraries are a natural fit, but Bailey asking about what's the best sort of partner type. There have been programs here in Louisiana at the community center in an apartment complex. There in Nebraska, I know that there is a program that's going to be occurring in the graduate student center of a local community college. So again, lots of different partner types that can implement primetime depending on what kind of funding is available in the partner state.
Thanks, Sarah. We have one more question that was kind of in the DMs, and it's a little bit of a two-parter.
Okay.
So if I'm in a state without a partner that's not in an affiliate state, how can I obtain program materials, and what amount of funding is needed to put this on? And you kind of touched on that a little bit a moment ago.
Yeah, so we're talking here about the quote unquote self-funded program option. I'm going to go ahead and say that because I do a lot of fundraising for this program, I do want to say that I think it's exceedingly easy to fundraise for. There's nobody out there when they hear about the breadth of engagement, the historical impact that the program has had, and the fact that really what we're doing is building and embedding family-focused practices in homes. People are like, where can I sign up? And, how can I, philanthropic folks are like, what do you need? If someone has access to funding, primetime preschool and primetime family reading, well, first of all, they'd get in touch with me. and talk with me about the potential for pilot. I do think we don't really like to do a whole lot of so-called one-off programming simply because it's kind of a lot to gear up for. Once you've got going, you've got site team members that are trained. Those same site team members can implement programs. And in fact, I mentioned earlier that I was a site team member and now I work for Primetime Family Reading. People who engage in this program really fall very quickly in love with it. I'm sorry, I'm talking around the issue. A program costs approximately $8,000 to implement. That includes, but it can cost a little bit more depending on the expenses associated with food and, sourcing those items and potential caterers or vendors in your community. But that budget includes a site support stipend for the purchase of meals. It includes the purchase of a set of 17 sets of books, for participating families. And typically there's between 17 is kind of the average number of families that attend a Primetime Family Reading program, but we do train folks to recruit between 25 and 30, because similar to any sort of event that you're planning, you over recruit and then folks come. Primetime Preschool, which has one book per session, is a little bit less expensive to implement. It's approximately $6,000 for the support stipend, the books, and honorariums for the implementing site teams, because some librarians are not able to receive stipends for their participation in the program, and it's just sort of part of their programming work. But we do want to support, we always want to, of course, compensate people for their efforts. And so that budget also includes an honorarium or stipend for the facilitating team of scholar and storyteller. So yeah.
Thank you so much. This is just such great information that I know that folks in this webinar today will certainly be able to take back to their home institutions. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and a special thanks to Sarah for sharing your expertise with us. And we really look forward to seeing everyone here at next month's Health Bites with Region 3.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.